I was trying to climb that waterfall right there. And this is the first time in this trip that I had a really close call. Hello, hello, hello. We're currently in San Pancho, Mexico. San Pancho, Mexico is a cute little hippie town on the south coast of Mexico. And I'm sitting on the roof of a hostel. And to be honest, it's a pretty grim hostel. We had cockroaches crawling out our sink and out of our shower last night. But hey, when you're traveling for one whole year, you have to forego luxury sometimes. But this hostel does have this nice little rooftop. And as the sun's setting, I want to tell you a bit of a story. And I want to talk about risk. There are two types of risk in this world. One is a real world risk, which can actually cause you harm. And one is kind of a fake illusion of risk. Now, in this story, I think I may have crossed into the real world risk. So I never really thought of myself as an inherent risk taker, but one of my friends pointed out to me that I do a lot of things which would be seen as quite risky. And I'm not sure where this risk-taking behavior actually came from. As a child, I was always very scared of everything. It took me ages to ride a bike, mostly because I was so scared of falling off. I was also terrified of speaking to waiters at restaurants. I always had to get my parents to order me food. It was quite embarrassing, really. And maybe I'm just making up for lost time. But yeah, nowadays, I take a lot of risks. And my friend pointed this out to me. I'm going to give you some examples, and then I'm going to tell you this story involving me and a slippery waterfall. And things going pretty bad.
Parkour!
Parkour. Some people may see this as a real-world risk. So what is parkour? For those of you who don't know, parkour is basically just movement through a space, usually an urban environment that involves jumping, vaulting, climbing, flipping, just any way to move through a usually artificial environment. And some people do it for speed, some people do it for tricks. I personally do a bit of both. And it's something that I've always been interested in since I was fairly young. I do think parkour as a sport has been blown out of proportion at how risky it actually is, because what you see online is really the extremes of parkour. You often see people online jumping from rooftop to rooftop, jumping out of 10-story car parks onto a pole, that kind of stuff. I personally would never do parkour that would endanger my life in any way, so everything I do is kind of ground level. I'm not climbing up high roofs, I'm not doing anything that's going to kill me. But parkour does carry some risk in the sense that even at ground level, there's still risk of injury. And in fact, a few years ago, I actually went to a parkour event and rolled my ankle quite badly and actually ended up breaking my foot. But that's a different story for a different day. Personally, I think sports like rugby, football, or soccer, you call it in the States, carry more risk than parkour. There's so many more uncontrollable variables, like people sliding in for a tackle, whereas parkour is your own body. You're the one moving through the environment. You're the only variable that you need to control. But I appreciate that parkour could be seen as a real world risk, especially when people are taking it to the extremes, when they're doing it high up on roofs, when they're doing the riskier stuff. So if parkour is a real world risk, what is a fake risk or an illusory risk? Taking time off work to travel, changing careers, moving to a new country. Now this is what I call an illusory risk. So 5 years ago, I was working for the NHS in the UK, was having a terrible time as a doctor, and I decided to leave. I took 6 months off to travel, and some may consider this a risk. A risk in the sense that there would be a gap in my CV. I would be taking time away from work. I wouldn't have any financial income during that period of time. But in my personal opinion, this is a risk that's just an illusion. Because really there's no way that taking this risk is going to kill you. And my definition of a real risk would be anything that has potential to harm you or harm anyone else. So taking time off is an illusory risk, but it's still one that people are greatly afraid of. And then after my travels, I took the risk of moving to a different country. I went to work in Australia as a doctor instead. And some would also say that moving to a new country is risky. You don't know how you'll find the work there. You don't know if you'll find and meet new people, make new friends. But again, I think this is one of those illusory risks. We have the brain of our ancestors, so we can't really differentiate between real risk and a risk that's just an illusion. Our brains can't tell the difference between real threats and these modern day threats which actually pose us no real harm. Most of our modern day threats, like changing the career, moving to a different country, quitting the job or long-term travel, these risks aren't going to kill you. If you're watching this, you probably have savings, you probably have family and friends you could lean on. If you failed at whatever endeavor you took on, you'd probably be okay. And of course, that doesn't go for everyone. I know there's people who live in less developed countries, have less of income, taking risks like quitting their job isn't accessible to everyone. But most likely, if you are watching this on YouTube, on your TV, your mobile, your computer, you probably do have that security blanket. And then there are some real world risks that could actually kill you. Now, this is the part of the video where the stupidity kicks in. So the first time I went traveling, this was about 5 years ago now, I was in a very different headspace where my risk-taking behavior was at an all-time high. I don't really know what the cause of this was. Maybe it's just because I was younger and stupider, or maybe it's because I didn't really want to go home to work in a life that I hated. I'm not sure. Either way, I was doing things like hanging out of moving trains in Sri Lanka, riding motorbikes in North Vietnam on pavements which were 1 metre wide with rocks on one side and a death drop on the other side. And to top it all off, standing on the edge of a cliff with my toes hanging off the edge. Just really stupid stuff. And I thought I had grown out of some of this reckless behaviour until I did this. And it's weird I decided to film this day because I don't usually just film off the cuff, but I was on my own and I just felt like documenting this little trip that I had. So this happened a couple of weeks ago when we were still in Colombia. We were staying near a small town called Hardin in a hostel which was on the outskirts of town. So the hostel was quite isolated and the town itself was already isolated from the nearest medical services. And we were staying in this nice little hostel, which was lovely. It's so crazy that this is just a hostel that I'm standing at the moment. It's part of the property of the hostel. Where we're actually staying is, you can kind of see that little red tin roof. Yeah, that's a little hut. And the rest of the hostel's in there. But all this land, it's all part of the hostel. The views, just absolutely incredible. And now what I'm doing is I'm walking to a river. And usually I do everything with my fiance, but today for some reason we were going our separate ways. I think she was doing yoga or something, and I wanted to go for a swim. Okay, we've arrived at the river. But apparently if you walk a little bit further, you can go for a little swim somewhere. So I haven't checked it out yet, but let's have a look now. I got to the river. I started walking up the river to find this swimming spot. It's not the easiest place to walk up. And this is when I started realizing it was kind of dangerous. The rocks were super slippery underfoot. There was no one around. I was completely on my own. But I thought, I'll be okay. I'll do parkour. Parkour! And then eventually after a difficult walk up this river, which was basically in the river, I get to this beautiful swimming spot. I think this must be the swimming spot. It was a bit of a walk. My feet got quite cold. I thought I was going to slip and die many times, but I didn't. But it's crazy that just stuff like this exists. All the waterfalls I go to usually are, you know, tourist attractions, whereas this is just here. So usually we're at tourist spots where there's loads of people around. There's often lifeguards, people wearing life jackets. But here, I was completely on my own. This waterfall was really off the beaten track, not even on Google Maps. But yeah, it's gorgeous. But yeah, I'm gonna measure the temperature of the water, have my morning dip and see how it goes. Yeah, and I was measuring the water temperature. I'm obsessed with cold water therapy, so I actually carry around a little thermometer with me. I think in my YouTube channel, I'm slowly revealing how weird I am. Right, so I think we are 16.3. And the temperature was 16.3, reads a bit high, so it's probably around 15.8, which is cold, but not super cold, that's gonna kill you. And I got in, I was having the best time. Enjoying my cold water therapy. And I thought, if this first pool is this beautiful, I wonder what the second pool is going to be like. So I decided to climb up. And yes, it was even more beautiful. So I thought, if the second pool is this beautiful, I wonder what the third pool is going to be like. However, the third pool was another story. The only way to get up this third pool was up this steep, sloping rock, which was covered in moss and this slippery sludge. There was a small pool at the bottom, roughly about half a metre deep, and there was this big slippery log just going up alongside it. As soon as I felt the rock, I was like, nah, there's no way I'm climbing up to the third pool. This is just way too slippery, way too dangerous. And I was about to pack up my stuff and go home. But then I saw on the left side of the wall, there was these rocks that I could potentially hold on to and pull myself up. And then my curiosity to see what the third pool was like got the better of me. So I actually wasn't recording at the time, and this video is a bit of a dramatic representation of what happened. This one was a controlled natural water slide that you're supposed to slide down, but that's not what happened to me. I just fell down the bloody waterfall. So I was trying to climb that waterfall right there. Not this, I climbed this level, that was fine, but then up here, I was trying to climb up that rock to go to the next level. And I was holding, it was so slippery, I definitely shouldn't have done it. But I was holding on to one of the rocks on the side and it just came loose and I just slipped down. And this is the first time in this trip that I had a really close call. As I slid down that rock, things kind of went in slow motion. The rock had come loose, I'd landed hard on my left hip. I started sliding down this steep rock and it was roughly 2 to 3 meters to the bottom. As I was sliding down, there was this big log in the way. I nearly hit my face on the log, but luckily I put one hand up to protect my face. And then I just kind of slid between the log and the rock into the pool below. The pool was only like up to my knees, but it's still enough to cushion my landing. But I was super close to potentially knocking myself out and my fiance finding me face down in the pool a few hours later. Fuck, that really shook me up. Yeah, fuck me. Might just walk back so I don't get too cold. But it was a super close call and I'm so lucky that this didn't happen when I was in the Philippines and I was doing the exact same thing, but the waterfall was 20 meters in the air and I was using a very thin, small rope climbing up the slippery waterfall. That was even more stupid, and the only reason I did it was because one of the local Filipinos made it look so easy. I was like, I can definitely do this. But as I was holding onto the rope, if I let go, I'm gonna literally fall about 20 meters into a pool of water which is about a meter deep. And looking back now, I just definitely shouldn't have done it. The point of this video isn't to show you how stupid and reckless I am. It isn't to put you off doing things. This episode shook me up, but in a good way. And it reminded me that there are real risks and there are fake, illusory risks. There are risks that you shouldn't take in your life. Like I said, anything that can cause you harm or harm to the people around you. But there are definitely risks that you should take in life, risks that are just an illusion. For example, taking time off work to travel, changing career, moving to a different country. These are all illusory risks. We still have the same fear-based response to them, but they're not real. You're not going to starve, you're not going to die. Your loved ones aren't going to be killed. And I'm pretty sure you already know what's a real risk and what's an illusory risk. If you're unhappy with your life situation, if you're unhappy with your career, or unhappy with where you live, if you take the risk to change that, what harm will actually come to you or the people around you? Is it a steep waterfall that you're going to slip and die on? Or will you just have to move back in with your parents for a couple of months? If you don't like your life, I think the biggest risk is thinking you'll be happy in 10 years, doing the same thing that you've always been doing, staying where you are. That's the biggest risk of all. I almost forgot. Next week is Day of the Dead, aka Dia de Muertos in Mexico, where we are. I'm going to be taking you with me and talking about everyone's favorite topic, death. I'll see you there.